Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and once again, I'm going to be guiding you through the ever-evolving world of technology, its impact on our lives, our work, and indeed world. Quick shout out, check out the all-new We Got Your Mac podcast. They dive into why businesses might want to embrace the Apple Mac platform on a large scale and allow you to explore the transformative power it can bring to your organisation, from enhancing employee experience to boosting productivity and even reshaping your organisation's image by allowing your workers to work from there, by allowing your teams to work on those Apple devices that they love. So they have new episodes every 2 weeks. They feature expert guests sharing knowledge and expertise around this topic. So subscribe to the podcast today, We Got Your Mac, and you can go to wegotyourmac.com to stay up to speed with the latest trends and insights. And today we're going to be diving into a topic that is as fascinating as it is crucial. I'm talking about the ethics of artificial intelligence. Huge talking point right now. And joining me today are two esteemed guests from Sopra Steria. First of all, we have Andy Whitehurst, and he's the UK CTO. And we also have joining him Kevin Macnish, Digital Ethics Consulting Manager. And together, they're going to be joining me today in a conversation about how, in a world where AI capabilities are expanding rapidly, ethical considerations have now become paramount. And with the EU taking groundbreaking steps to regulate AI, I think we can all agree it's time to explore the impact of these developments. So Andy and Kevin will shed light on why ethical AI isn't just a choice, but a necessity, and how we can navigate these uncharted waters to create technology that benefits all of society, not just a few techies and IT people. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the UK so you can join me, Andy and Kevin in conversation about all this and much more. A massive warm welcome to the show, guys. Andy, to begin with, can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi there. Yes, thanks, Neil. So Andy Whitehurst, I'm the UK CTO for a company called Sopra Steria, who are a business process and IT services provider. My focus is in the UK, and I guess I'm all about our technology strategy as a business.
Fantastic. And Kevin, it'd be great to hear a little about who you are, what you do too.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. So Kevin Macnish, I head up the ethics and sustainability consulting practice at Sopra Steria. So working with Andy in the UK, trying to help companies and organizations manage risk as it arises around ethics and sustainability.
And you mentioned ethics there, and it's a huge topic right now, especially around things like AI. So to set the scene for our conversation today, Andy, can you discuss maybe some examples of the most concerning potential consequences of unethical AI use and development that you think any business leader listening should be aware of? And also, how imminent are these threats?
Okay, thanks, Neil. Yeah, it's a great question, and it is something that I think concerns all of us within our business and within our client base. For me, at the very highest level, this is a question of human rights, and you know, there is the potential for AI, to have some significant human rights type impacts and implications. We've all heard of the dangers of discrimination and bias within AI, and what that might lead to in terms of decisions that are made that may have negative consequences on people. I think we've also heard a lot about privacy. What's being shared with these big AI engines, with large language models, and where's it going? Who's getting sight of it? So there are some big considerations there. For me, though, trying to make all of that a little more real and maybe just a little more immediate is for me to do with inequality and marginalization. So there's a real onus and sort of dependency and I guess a duty of care on us as IT professionals to make sure that the use of AI is really transparent, is really understandable, because, there are those amongst us who are IT professionals and have a good understanding. There'll be some mathematicians listening that can probably dissect the inner workings of AI, but there'll also be people that have less understanding, that are scared of what AI might mean to them. So making it more understandable and more transparent so everyone has the confidence to adopt it and to let AI help them in their daily lives, in their jobs, in their roles. I think if we don't do that and we don't take everybody on the journey, it's going to create even more of a digital divide within our country, within our communities across the world. And I think, I was at a conference a couple of days ago where the keynote speech was all about the impact of AI, and they were talking about how AI is not necessarily going to replace people's jobs, but people who know how to use AI will begin to replace people's jobs. So there's a key message in there, Neil. We've got to make it accessible and understandable to all so that we don't just drive an acceleration of the digital divides we already have.
Yeah, and it's such an important message. I was at the VMware conference last week and they were talking about private AI and keeping business data safe. And anyone, I think the one thing that unites everyone, whether you're in tech or outside of tech, we've all seen on our newsfeed, that legislation and regulation is on the way. So, Kevin, I'd love to bring you in on this. And what are the key elements that the EU's new AI legislation addresses? And are there any gaps that you think should be urgently filled in that too?
I think the AI Act is actually quite an exciting piece of legislation and probably going to be on a par with the General Data Protection Regulation for the impact that it has, both within Europe and beyond. It's the first piece of full regulation that I'm aware of governing AI, certainly at this scale. And what the AI Act does is it breaks algorithms, machine learning, artificial intelligence down into 3 risk categories. So at the top are prohibited items, things such as AI, which might be focused on having subliminal impacts on people's behavior, or that might lead to some sort of social scoring. Those sorts of AI are to be prohibited in Europe. Secondly, there's the high risk category. So for instance, AI which might have a significantly harmful impact on people's health or their safety. And again, coming back to Andy's point about fundamental human rights. So AI which is used for recruitment or selection of staff, monitoring or evaluating things that are related to contractual relationships, those all classed as high risk. And then there's the more general non-high risk, or we might want to more casually call it a low-risk environment. And particularly for the high-risk category, there is going to be an introduction of impact assessments. So rather like GDPR brought in the idea of data protection impact assessments, there will be similar impact assessments for AI as a result of the AI Act. And one of these, going back again to Andy's point about human rights, is that there is to be a human rights assessment or an impact assessment. So developers and users of AI are called upon to think through what is going to be the impact of their technology on human rights. And I think that is very, very exciting and a positive move. I think as regards the gaps, I'm not so much sure this is a gap in the AI Act itself, but from a UK perspective, we kind of sit outside of this since having left the European Union. Now, GDPR had an extraordinary extraterritorial impact in that it affects any European anywhere in the world. With the AI Act, it's only going to apply to artificial intelligence systems which are developed or sold or used within the political European Union. So as a result of which, in the UK, we don't have to abide by the AI Act. However, we do need to think about how we are going to govern AI in the UK. Yes, it's really important that we are pro-innovation, and I think already other countries within Europe, such as Germany and France, have raised concerns that the AI Act might limit their innovation and the potential of companies in those countries. So I think we need to think about our position on the outside of saying, how are we going to align with the AI Act? Now, my personal preference would be a very close alignment because I think it has a lot of good things in it. But obviously that is something which needs to be worked through in some detail.
100% with you there. And I was chatting with Neil Smith from the Scottish Government last week about their strategic integration of tech and a shift towards a more agile and collaborative environment, which are indeed crucial for delivering exceptional services to their citizens who almost expect that now. But if we bring AI back into this, how do you see governments and industry bodies better facilitating a public discourse around ethical AI, and what role does the average citizen have in this conversation?
So I think I'll kick off with this one, and then Kevin, maybe you can contribute as well. But I think it's really interesting that kind of phrase of average citizen, Neil. For me, sort of comes back to the first question. The concerns I have about marginalisation and inequality. Where does our average citizen sit in terms of understanding, in terms of confidence, and in terms of willingness to adopt AI and to be, to have their lives impacted by AI? I think for me, there's a big piece here around education for the average citizen. This is happening. Earlier on, we were talking about, how imminent are these threats. Things are happening now. I opened up Edge a couple of weeks ago to do some research on the internet, and top right hand side, suddenly I've got Copilot. It's there. Microsoft have launched it. It's there. It can help me summarize, the websites that I'm viewing. That kind of a thing. I know about it. Does our average citizen know about it? Are they embracing it? Are they feeding back on it, helping it be refined? And in terms of, so I think from a government and industry body perspective, for me, we really need to catch up in terms of education and awareness, and really make sure that not just individuals, but, trade unions, professional bodies, UK, technical UK bodies are really helping to raise the understanding, dispel some of the myths, cut through some of the hype, and get people on board with this. I think, Kevin, anything to add?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Yeah, I'll just add to that as well. I mean, firstly, as a former academic, I would second your comment about education. Absolutely, that's something which I think is hugely needed. And I think there's been a focus recently, probably over the last year or so, of foundation AI, or what's been called more recently frontier AI, really big, exciting stuff with large language models and so on. And that's really caught the public's imagination. And obviously in the UK, we recently had the AI Safety Summit. And I think that's raised the issue for some people. But I think there are, two things. One is that there are some people who just haven't really engaged with that in quite the same way. And secondly, I think there are other aspects of AI which are probably more of a challenge to people's way of life and the impacts that AI can have on people than these frontier systems which are grabbing the headlines at the moment. So I think it's really important that we take forward a holistic understanding of what's meant by AI and not just think about large language models or whatever the latest hype-grabbing piece is.
I completely agree. And I was on the show floor of a conference recently, and I was shown this next generation retail store where the entire store was run by AI, cameras and cloud tech. And of course, one of the journalists asked, what happens to all the manual workers here? And they said, well, hopefully they will all be they will all be trained up in AI and have different roles. But I think that's the point, as you've mentioned a few times here, that average person, who is training them in AI and who is ensuring that they're not getting left behind, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And from a technology leadership perspective, how do you think companies can foster an ethical culture around AI within their organizations to ensure this?
I think, Neil, again, another great question. It's about shifting things to the left. And what I mean by that is right in the early stages of our design life cycle, when a client's come to us with a problem, or when we believe we've got an opportunity to disrupt a market or build a new end-to-end business process service to take to the market, it's at that stage that you start thinking about ethics. It's at that phase that you start asking yourself, who's going to benefit from our use of AI? From a people perspective, from a planet and environment perspective, from a purpose perspective, people, planet, purpose. Why? You can do all manner of things with AI, but should you? So for me, we've got to ask those questions really early in the design life cycle. This is a cultural shift. We've got to develop a ethical AI conscience as part of everything that we do. We need to hold each other to account, keep ourselves honest when it comes to the deployment of AI. Yeah, so all those decisions about where we invest, where do we embrace, where do we deploy, where do we need to be really cautious because of the impacts on people, because of the impacts on the planet, because of what the underlying purpose of what we're trying to do is. We've got to stay very human. I think there's a really key bit for me here, Neil. This is all about technology and AI and what the next wave of next generation IT can do for us. But we've got to remain human-centered and human-centric when it comes to designing AI into our day-to-day business and our day-to-day business processes. AI needs to be a friend to the human, not a foe. But we've got to ask all those questions early on. It's not, make the right decisions early. Let's not disappear down rabbit holes and cul-de-sacs with great ideas that should never have AI in them in the first place. Yeah, we've got to stay focused.
Absolutely. I would just add to that as well that, when you're designing a car, you don't wait until you've built the car to say, okay, how do we make it safe? The safety aspect of a car needs to be thought about right at the very beginning, as Andy was saying. It should be there as a requirement. However, it's not just a requirement. It becomes part of the whole build of the vehicle and should be there. Safety should be there the whole way through the design and development of the vehicle. And I think exactly the same is true with AI, that we can sit there and say, yes, we need to be ethical, but unless we're actually asking those questions throughout the design process, then we're going to end up with essentially good intentions, but unethical AI, or at least AI which is neglectful of ethics, which could effectively amount to the same thing.
So for any business leaders that are listening, maybe they're just beginning to explore AI and they're just starting to ask questions. What kind of technical questions do you think should be raised throughout that development process to ensure that ethical considerations are adequately addressed?
Well, sure. So I think really, as I said, that it's a matter of understanding the development process and what's going on. And obviously, each system is going to have its own sort of development. But certainly, there's the requirements phase, which we would start out with, which we've talked about. But there's also then thinking about the data which you're using to populate and train the model. Where are you getting it from? How are you getting it? How is it being processed and interpreted? How is it being tested and trained? A lot of talk at the moment is going on around, well, we can use synthetic data to step away from using real personal data, which on one level is great because that becomes more privacy preserving. However, we need to make sure that the synthetic data accurately maps to the real world. Otherwise, it's going to be effectively useless. So there are a lot of questions coming up in these sort of development areas. And then there's questions around security. How is the product being sold? And then ultimately, how's the product being used? Are there ways in which it could be misused or abused? And so I think the whole way through the development life cycle, we could even go through to decommissioning at the end of the life cycle as well and think about that. Numerous questions which we need to be considering, which will have an impact on some of those things Andy started out by talking about, such as discrimination and privacy, marginalization. All of these things need to be sort of constantly at the back of our minds. And again, I'll go back to the example of the car. Wherever you're involved in building a car or anything, really, you need to have safety in mind while you're doing it. And I think the same is true for ethics in the development of any AI system.
And although we are in the very early days of enterprise AI, I'm curious, Andy, are you able to share any successful case stories or maybe just a few examples where AI has been developed and used in a ethically responsible manner, just to bring what we're talking about to life here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've talked quite a bit about the development, process and being ethical by design in the early phases. So I'll probably focus a little bit on some real use cases that I've seen across our business that I think are really good ethical and responsible use of AI. So the first example is around fraud prevention, actually. So financial crime within the banking and financial services sector. It's a day-to-day challenge for everybody. Everyone's concerned about identity theft, and everyone's concerned about the implications of that. And it's a big cost to the industry. It's not just the financial impact either. It's the it's a stressful situation to be in if somebody's fraudulently transacting with your money on your behalf, and it's not you. So, that's a real area where, I've seen within our business some great strides forward to harness AI to identify the financial transactions that are genuinely fraudulent. They're not just unusual; they are organised crime. They are actual, genuine financial crime. So that's it's using AI to actually identify those transactions that look suspicious. But actually the outcome for everybody, I think, is a really ethically strong one. Another sort of maybe lower level example is just, we've talked a little bit already on the podcast about large language models. And we're making good use of those internally. We're designing some of our own. We're looking very closely at the whole privacy and, security around that, and some private LLMs. But I see a real sort of maybe obvious benefit of something like a large language model. The way that they can look at vast quantities of text and reduce those down to very succinct, very relevant summaries of what's there. Maybe it's a big document full of T's and C's, or, it's a complex financial document, or it's to do with pensions and it's an 80-page, document outlining all of the different conditions and so on. The ability to summarize that for individuals with any kind of impairment or disability, so that their, for example, screen reader can quickly work through a summary and give them the information and insight they need about that big quantity of data that may have taken significant amounts of effort to dissect before. That, for me, is a really strong ethical piece of use of AI. There's many other things. Sustainability reporting, automating that is something we've been looking at, making it more efficient and more accurate. And there's a bigger picture thing here for me. We have an environmental responsibility in terms of the use of AI. AI and its expansion over the coming years is going to massively increase compute power. The requirements for compute. The requirement for compute power increases our energy use. It increases, in the environmental impact of that. Water that's used for cooling. There are massive implications of that. So I see a good use case here for AI. It's sort of a self-managing and a self-monitoring and a self-fulfilling use case where AI actually helps us to manage the load of AI across our data centers and our cloud environments. So just a few examples, Neil. There are many more, but you're certainly starting to see some good positive use cases for AI.
Love that. And to further give everyone listening something concrete to walk away with today, Kevin, are you able to share some actionable steps that both private companies and public bodies could maybe take right now to ensure that AI is developed and used in an ethical manner?
Yeah, sure, Neil. I think there was a really interesting survey which came out from the Institute of Directors in Ireland a month ago, looking at how directors of companies thought about AI. And a third of them said they didn't understand the challenge of bias in AI. It's quite significant given that is one of the key challenges which AI raises. Probably more concerning was that while 58% said that they recognized the ethical risk of AI was significant to their company, 53% said that they had no IT strategy in place, which included AI and cybersecurity. So that means that people are aware, but they're just not quite sure what to do and where to go. So I think, clearly there are people working in this field at the moment. There are experts in AI ethics that you can turn to and that can help with developing strategies and developing responses. I think a second thing which has come out from our own research we carried out over the summer on how citizens trust government and other online services was that while 79% of the respondents we spoke to knew about generative AI, such as large language models, quite a large number still felt threatened as regards the future of humankind and the future of society by what AI could bring. And so I think, to me, that speaks of a need for a far better and more sane level of conversation than we've sometimes had as to what AI is doing. And I come back to my earlier point that AI is not just the frontier large language models. It's a huge swathe of technology. And if we don't get the messaging and the discussion right at this point, then we risk going down a route whereby people are scared of what's happening and they just don't engage at all. And I think that would be a huge loss. So I would say, firstly, get a strategy in place, and then secondly, communicate as clearly and as transparently as you can as to what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Fantastic advice. And finally, there is a real pressure on every single person to be in a almost state of continuous learning, and it can be challenging just keeping up with the pace of technological change. So, Kevin, first of all to you, where or how do you self-educate? And then we'll bring Andy and see how he keeps up to speed too. But you first, Kevin.
Oh, sure. So, well, as I said earlier, I'm a former academic, and so I try as best I can to keep up with the academic literature of what's happening around ethics and AI. I still, I've just published a book this week, which is very exciting, on the ethics of surveillance in times of emergencies. So I do try and keep a hand in that way, but it is difficult. There is a lot of information out there. I think as a result, what I try to do is to focus my efforts on really understanding how do we embed ethics effectively in companies. So there's lots of other important discussion which is going on right now. I think a lot of the ethical problems that we've been talking about here have been well established within certainly the academic community. But the real challenge that a lot of people are facing right now, and this is why I said earlier we reach out to some experts in this field, is how do we actually embed this? How do we make these ethical considerations? How do we mitigate against them? How do we solve that problem? And I think that's the thing which is really driving me at the moment.
And Andy, what about yourself? How do you keep up to speed and self-educate?
Yeah, and it's a good question, Neil, because I think there's too much information out there. Yeah, there's a tidal wave of interest and information, and less people, an awful lot of hype still around AI, what it is, what it can do. So it is really difficult actually it's not difficult to learn in that scenario, but it's difficult to see the wood from the trees. Yeah, so it's really difficult to be selective and pick the learning that matters, and that for me, that's the key approach I take to my continuous learning in this space, is to be selective, and to really think where are the areas of biggest benefit? Where are the areas of real interest? Everybody's jumping on the AI bandwagon. Yeah. So there's an awful lot of information out there. There's too much learning. For me, be selective, pick a few areas that are of interest and relevance to you and to your business or to your day job or to, your particular interests, and drill down into them, because I think otherwise, there is so much noise out there that it can be a little bit overwhelming.
It really is. And for anyone wanting to dig a little bit deeper on anything we talked about today, find out more information about you, your work, and even your book as well, Kevin, let's give that a shout out too. Where would you like to point everyone?
So I think there's plenty of information on the Sopra Steria website, and you can get our information about our views of the world and our ambitions, and also some of the offers that we have in this space. You'll be able to find myself and Kevin on sort of traditional channels like LinkedIn as well. So please do look us up. Please do reach out.
Absolutely. I'll just add to that, I also have a podcast called Getting Tech Right, which would be great if you're interested in digging deeper into this. It's a monthly discussion with academics and practitioners in this field about how to approach ethics in technology.
Fantastic. Well, I'll be checking that podcast out for sure. And just love chatting with you both today about why it is crucial for AI to be used and developed in an ethical way, how it can be achieved, and also how by simply adopting an ethics by design approach, it can ensure AI is used and developed to benefit society. It's that human element that's so often missed. So a big thank you for sharing that today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
So as we wrap up today's episode, I just want to thank Andy and Kevin for sharing their enlightening perspectives on the ethical dimensions of AI. And I think their insights remind me that while AI holds immense potential, its path must be navigated with care and responsibility. And for me, the conversation is a real call to action for all of us in the tech world and business world to think deeply engage in public discourse, and integrate ethics into that very fabric of AI development. Because remember, the future of AI is not just about what it can do, but how it should be used. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Everything we talked about will impact every single person listening, no matter where you are in the world. So share with me your thoughts, techblogwriter@outlook.com. If you'd like to join this conversation and come on the podcast, you can email me, or you've got a question to ask, or if you just want to say hello, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram @Neil C. Hughes. So thank you for tuning in to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil, your guide through this complex yet captivating world of technology. So remember, stay curious, stay informed, but more than anything, just a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.